have about a minute. Is that right, everyone?
Yes.
All right, I have 12:30. Are we about ready?
I think we are.
As ready as I'll ever be, I guess.
Okay. Jared, are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Okay. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 2020 mock debate. This debate is sponsored by the Student Government Association of Northeast Alabama Community College. My name is Billy Day. I'm a history instructor here at Northeast, and I will be your moderator for this debate. Our participants are Ms. Lauren Mills and Mr. Drew Altman. Lauren is currently serving as SGA Treasurer, and she will be representing the Democratic Party in this debate. Drew is an SGA freshman representative, and he will be representing the Republican Party. Also joining us is SGA President Matthew Anderson. Matthew will be fielding questions from the audience. We are glad to have you with us today. We will begin with our first question. We will start with Lauren, and then Drew will have a chance to answer the same question. The first question, the most discernible issue on everyone's mind at the moment is, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic and the government's response to it. Has the current administration acted accordingly to curb the adverse effect of the pandemic? What would you argue should be the most effective approach to end, or at least shorten, the pandemic? Lauren?
COVID-19 has made a great impact on this nation in numerous ways. There have been over 8.78 million cases and over 226K in deaths due to this virus. With this being said, COVID-19 is a very dangerous virus and needs to be taken very seriously. The most effective approach to at least shorten this pandemic is to mandate mask wearing. Nationally, that way we can avoid the spread of COVID-19. The most effective way is to pursue critical economic measures to help hard-hit workers, families, and small business to stabilize the American economy, as well as expanding Obama's Affordable Care Act to people in need of COVID-19 care and or testing. That way we can ensure that all Americans have access to regular, reliable, and free testing. If a vaccine was to create, it will take anywhere from 12 to 18 months, according to the health experts, including the administration's own Center to Disease Control and Prevention chief. This is because of the extensive testing required to ensure it is safe and effective. We also need to guarantee paid leave for all who get sick and for workers caring for family members. With all of us in this nation fighting together as one against COVID, it is setting the foundation for the future.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew, same question.
I think that Trump's administration has done a good job curbing the pandemic. Early on, Trump started by cutting off travel from China at the end of January, and he expanded those travel restrictions from several European countries and other countries like Brazil and Iran. Also, when the nation was faced with a lack of supplies, especially ventilators, Trump urged private companies to shift production and expedite production to fill those needs. His administration took early actions towards developing and testing a vaccine as well. The best approach to ending or shortening the pandemic would be to develop a successful vaccine.
Thank you, Drew. For the second question, we will begin with Drew. The recent death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the subsequent nomination and confirmation of Judge Amy Coney Barrett to replace Ginsburg on the court has opened up a debate in itself. The Republicans argued that President Trump and the United States Senate had a constitutional duty to fill the vacancy on the court, while the Democrats argued that the move is invalid based on the Senate Republican leadership denial of President Obama's Supreme Court nominee in 2016. How would you characterize this argument? Drew.
I think that the argument can be addressed easily if we look at Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. It reads, "The President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint judges of the Supreme Court." So Trump's nomination and the Senate's recent confirmation of Judge Barrett are both acceptable under the Constitution.
Thank you. Now, Lauren.
Although it is a president's constitutional right to nominate a Supreme Court justice, this is very unfair for Trump to nominate a Supreme Court justice this early to election. Garland was nominated to fill the 2016 position of the Supreme Court created by the death of Justice Antonin Scalia on that February. The Senate Majority Leader Mitchell McConnell said that the next Supreme Court justice should be chosen by the next president to be elected later that year. Therefore, Trump's nomination so close to the election date should not be decided by him at the time being. The nomination should be up to the winning candidate in this upcoming election. As we already know that Judge Amy Coney Barrett has taken her seat on the Supreme Court with just 8 days until the next election. And it is unfair to our previous president, Barack Obama, and his nominee, Merrick Garland.
Thank you. For the third question, we will begin with Lauren. Has enough been done by the individual state to ensure the presidential election on November the 3rd, 2020 is as fair and valid and categorically possible? If not, what should the state do to guarantee the fairness and the validity of the election?
I want to start out by saying voting is very important. And if you can vote in person or vote early, then do which is best for you. Go out and vote because we all determine the outcome of this election. We should vote like our democracy depends on it. Now to my response to this question. The individual states have ensured that the presidential election is fair and valid by allowing Americans to vote by mail. This allows people to stay at home and vote. That way, if they're at high risk of catching COVID, they can still exercise their right to vote without life-threatening consequences.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew.
I think that this election is already vulnerable to domestic unfairness. There has been news of some U.S. states modifying their system at the last minute. For example, Pennsylvania announced that all ballots must be in a secrecy envelope to be considered valid. This ruling is disliked by people from both parties, and already over 20 million mail-in ballots have been returned, so there is concern over whether the mail-in ballots will be accounted for correctly and validly.
Thank you, Drew. For our fourth question, we will begin with you, Drew. Illegal immigration was at the forefront of the 2016 presidential election, but has been overshadowed this year with the COVID-19 pandemic. Is illegal immigration still a major problem? And if so, what is the best strategy to effectively deal with illegal immigration while at the same time ensuring the basic human rights of migrants?
Even though we do not hear much on the state of illegal immigration lately, it is still a pressing issue that needs to be addressed. Just constructing physical barriers is not enough. The U.S. government needs to refocus and reform immigration. Legal immigration is a hallmark of the United States, so it needs to continue being accessible. Therefore, the path to legal immigration needs to be revisited and developed furthermore.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren.
Even though illegal immigration has been shadowed, it is still a major problem that needs to be addressed. The best strategy to effectively deal with illegal immigration is by first giving holders of TPS and deferred enforced departure who have been in the country for an extended period of time and built lives in the U.S. a path to citizenship. Also, by giving dreamers and their families a roadmap to citizenship through legislative immigration reforms and to protect families from inhumane separation. Instead of building a wall around the borders, we should invest better technology coupled with the private protection at the borders, both at and between ports of entry. This will deliver legislative immigration reforms to ensure that the U.S. remains open and welcome to people from every part of the world, and to bring hardworking people who have enriched our communities and our country. We need to modernize our system with priority on keeping families together by providing a roadmap to citizenship for nearly 11 million undocumented immigrants, growing our trade and industry opportunity across the country by improving and increasing opportunities for legal immigration, preserve the long-standing directive of our immigration system to reunite families and enhance our diversity. Lastly, to just make this entire process easier and more effective.
Thank you, Lauren. We will begin with you for our fifth question. As college students, the availability and affordability of higher education and workforce training should be a concern to you. Is the federal government doing enough to ensure that affordable education and training is available to all people within the United States? If not, what more should be done? Lauren.
Everyone should be able to earn a degree beyond high school if they choose to, without money standing in the way. This is why we should make public colleges and universities tuition free for the students from low-income families. Support making community college and trade school tuition free for all students, including Dreamers. The need to increase federal support for service like child care on college campuses so more students can balance the demands of school and family and graduate with their degrees. Also, to support increased funding for wraparound services, including covering the cost of textbooks and fees for low-income students and establishing programs to address campus food insecurity so students can focus on what matters the most, their studies.
Thank you. Now, Drew.
First off, I think it should be said that it is not the government's place to regulate educational affordability at a post-secondary level. However, it is the government's responsibility when you look at K through 12, and I think that there are some things that the government can do there. I would suggest the government lead a program targeting high school students that helps showcase the convenience and affordability of trade schools and junior colleges and helps to dissolve some of the stigma surrounding those two types of schools. Also, I would suggest that the government work on raising teachers' salaries.
Thank you, Drew. For our next question, we will begin with you. Since it was signed into law in 2010, the Affordable Care Act has been a highly debated political issue at all levels of government. 18 Republican-led states, along with the Department of Justice, currently have a case filed with the United States Supreme Court to strike down the Affordable Care Act as unconstitutional. Should the Affordable Care Act be repealed or should it remain in place? Please defend your answer as to why it should be repealed or why it should be left in place.
The Affordable Care Act should be repealed. It is a governmental overstep into medical care, and it is popularly beheld as borderline socialism. Already, the act has been raising taxes for citizens, and the ever increasing premiums are also hurting citizens too.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren?
The Affordable Care Act should be left in place because more than 100 million Americans with pre-existing conditions from heart disease to asthma are secure in the knowledge that insurance companies can no longer discriminate against them. Women can no longer be charged more than men just because of their gender. We need to keep up the fight until all Americans can access secure, affordable, and high-quality health insurance. I fundamentally believe healthcare is a right for all, not a privilege for few. The Affordable Care Act is going to build the healthcare system the American people have always deserved. One that finally provides universal healthcare coverage, reduced prescription drug prices, premiums, and out-of-pocket costs, peddles in overall healthcare expenses, and tackles the deep-seated discrimination in our healthcare system. It will build a healthcare system that is driven by the needs of patients and the people who care for them, instead of the profit motives of corporations. The Affordable Care Act will tackle deep-rooted racial inequalities in healthcare, reduce prescription drug prices by standing up to big pharmacy companies, and make it easier to access mental health and substance use disorder treatment and long-term services. Healthcare should be a human right. Therefore, we want to build on and strengthen the Affordable Care Act.
Thank you, Lauren. For our next question, we will begin with Lauren. A reporter for the U.S. edition of The Guardian recently entitled an article, "Racism in America is not the exception, it's the norm." In respect to the events in recent months regarding instances of police brutality, charges of racial injustice, rioting in major cities, along with the strengthening of the Black Lives Matter movement and the rise of groups opposed to the movement, do you agree or disagree with the title of the article, and what are your suggestions for dealing with the argument of racism in America?
I agree with the title of this article because there has always been this unseen battle in America that denies the Black population the human right it extends to its white population. Only the few times it is caught on camera or by the media, it is an exception. It's false news. This is normal, everyday occurring thing. African Americans are being targeted by their race every day. The media just does not catch everything. By saying that it is an exception is making a terrible excuse to treat a human being wrongfully. We must acknowledge that there can be no realization of the American dream without grappling with the lasting effects of slavery and facing up to the century-long campaign of violence, fear, and trauma wrought upon African Americans. The system itself is horrible by targeting African Americans. Therefore, we need to engage in the Federal Reserve Racial and Economic Equality Act. All people in the United States should be able to easily access public services, and all citizens should be able to exercise their constitutional right to vote without facing unjust or discriminatory boundaries.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew, your response.
I don't think that racism is the norm in America. I do think it is a toxic exception. Everyone is vulnerable to implicit bias, and as a nation, we need to discuss our implicit biases and work to overcome them. Americans should not be colorblind, but should be color brave. We don't need to look past the difference to solve the problem, but we need to look at the difference and learn to accept and love our nation's diversity.
Thank you, Drew. And now for our last prepared question, we will begin with Drew. The economy is always a major issue in presidential elections. During the one and only presidential debate in 1980, Republican candidate Ronald Reagan, who went on to win the presidential election, asked the question, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" This question has been with us ever since, and it is relevant in 2020 as it was in 1980. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Explain.
Ignoring the current pandemic, I would say that I am better off than I was 4 years ago, and I do think that the American people are better off as well. After all, Trump has created about 4 million jobs, And the employment rate was the highest point it has been in the last decade before the pandemic shut down in March and April. Trump has also settled many pressing international issues like those with North Korea and Iran over the past few years.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren.
This is a very interesting question. Me personally, I'm better off now than I was 4 years ago because I have decided to educate myself in numerous subjects and numerous topics. As for the economy, we are not doing better off now than we were 4 years ago because of COVID-19. It is upon us and has made a great impact on our economy. As for the Democratic Party, the number of members have grown. We have become more outspoken on inequality topics. I believe that we have grown better and stronger by sticking up for our beliefs and not allowing people to be discriminated against.
Thank you. That's the last of our prepared questions. Now we will turn it over to Matthew, who may have some questions from the audience. Matthew, do you have anything yet?
No questions at the moment. If there's anyone listening in the audience that wishes to ask a question, they can type it in the YouTube comments and I will put it on the PowerPoint.
Okay, I hope everyone should have heard that. Please ask your questions now. Anyone who's watching. We'll give everyone a minute or two to formulate their questions. Hopefully we'll have some. Any questions yet, Matthew? Okay, we do have a question. What are both of your opinions on the possibility of Joe Biden packing the court? That would be the Supreme Court. We'll begin with you, Lauren. We ended with you, so we'll begin with you, Lauren, okay? What is your view?
I feel that it's very important that we pack the Supreme Court. The more we have involved with it, the better, and more opinions being said and not just a selected few.
Thank you. Drew?
This is a popular question at the moment, and it's also a hard question to answer, but I would be against packing the Supreme Court. It hasn't been done in the longest time, and so I'm worried of the effects it might have on our government.
Okay, thank you. That was a very good question. Any others from the audience, please? Okay, our question is, many people feel disheartened about voting. What would you say to encourage people to vote? Drew?
I know that voting seems daunting this year with the virus, but voting is a very special thing for Americans, that we have this right to vote. And I do believe that even though we are in the virus, that there will be a lot of new voters coming to the polls. So I just encourage everyone to use this great opportunity that our nation has, and to go voice their opinions.
Thank you, Drew. Now, Lauren.
I agree with Drew about the pandemic making it harder and people not wanting to go vote. I feel like you should still go out there, just have your PPE on, and go out and vote, because we all determine the outcome of this election, and we should vote like our democracy depends on it. Your vote does matter. You may think that just one vote is not going to make a difference, but it does. Your voice, it matters, and you should vote. Just take safety precautions when you go out and vote.
Thank you, Lauren. Our next question, any others, Matthew? The question, given the ongoing pandemic, what should be done to ensure that the November election is fair and secure? Very similar to question 3 that we asked, but I'll give our participants another opportunity to clarify on that. Lauren?
I believe that we should still do the voting by mail, because that way people at home that are at high risk, that have diabetes, heart lung problems, that they won't catch the coronavirus. And it should be sealed accordingly to how certain states have had it made. That way we can have it secure and your vote doesn't get changed. And for the people that can go out, for the younger ones like us, still keep in mind that other people might be going to vote, so you need to also wear your PPE when you're out and about. That way, just in case you are a carrier, you don't expose anybody else. But vote any way you can, by mail, early vote, or vote in person. Just get out and vote.
Thank you. Now, Drew.
I think that the government should use extra monitorization on the election, because in this unsure times, a lot can slip through the cracks.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, for our next question, Matthew. Hopefully we'll have some more questions. Okay, we have a question for Drew and a question for Lauren. For Drew, how can one find themselves supporting Donald Trump when he has continuously made derogatory remarks toward many minority groups? And for Lauren, do you think Joe Biden is stable, in the right mind, enough to be president? Okay, Drew, we'll start with you.
I do think that I can agree that sometimes Trump does make some remarks that are not politically correct, but I do think that still he is doing a lot of good for this country, and we just need to look at where the economy is, specifically ignoring the pandemic. Before the pandemic, see how our country was climbing up, and we just need to remember that.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren?
Yes, I do think he's in the right and stable mind. He has slipped up a couple of times, but haven't we all? We all can't be perfect. We mistakenly say things every day, and I think he would be a great leader for our nation. Just needs to get focused and concentrate, because we all slip up on our words, and when we're used to something so much, we're gonna keep on saying that. So I think he's right and stable. He's just got a lot going on with campaigning and all that.
Thank you. Okay, Matthew, for our next question. The question is, as far as PPE goes, where do you stand on regulating it? Lauren?
I think it should be nationally regulated, that everyone should wear a mask when they're out in the public, whether it's you have it or not, because you could be a carrier and have no symptoms, and we all are exposing other people. If you protect yourself with the PPE, you're also protecting other families. That someone could be out grocery shopping for their elderly, for someone sick, and you not being protected yourself is causing their family heartache.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew.
President Trump has not made a national mask wearing mandate because he's worried that it is infringing on people's right, that they shouldn't be forced to have to wear a mask. And a lot of people disagree with Trump on that, but I think he's doing a good job of making sure that everyone's rights are not infringed upon.
Thank you, Drew. All right, for our next question. I want to say to the audience, you're doing a good job with these questions. Keep them coming. Okay, for Drew, if your plan is to repeal the Affordable Care Act, what would you do to help the 23 million Americans that are currently on this plan? For Lauren, how should police brutality be approached? Okay, thank you. Drew.
That's a good question, since the Affordable Care Act has become a big part of our country now. I do think that the government just needs to sit down and think of some other ideas for how we could deal with that issue. It is a big issue, and it's going to be a lot of work figuring something out, but I would encourage them to try a lot of routes to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Well, Lauren, for your question.
This is a really good question as well. I want to first start out by saying there's going to be bad apples in every group. And I don't think we should stereotype the whole community with just one bad apple. And with the police officers, I do feel like they should have more restrictions on when going forceful on someone. They should have a better accusation, I guess I should say, instead of just going at it full course. You need to be sure that you know what you see and what's happening before you just act. This goes with everyone, but especially people that are supposed to be there to protect us.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. For our next question from the audience, Matthew. Okay, for Drew, why is the economy more important than how human beings are being treated? And for Lauren, I have seen video clip of Joe Biden making racist remarks. So why is Trump the only one blamed? Okay, we'll start with Lauren.
For one, I think video clips and media can be edited. I haven't seen these personally, but I know that Trump does make it a daily thing. He always has something, and everyone does slip up and say something that they regret. So maybe this was one of Joe Biden's incidents. I'm not for sure because I have not seen the clips myself.
Thank you, Lauren. Drew?
So I do not think that the economy is more important than human rights. And as far as human rights go, I do think that America needs to have a discussion about the state of racism, and we need to work on that definitely, and accepting each other. But also, the United States is a huge world power economically, so we do have to be very on top of the economy so that we stay at the top.
Thank you, Drew. For our next question, Matthew. Keep those questions coming. They've been good. The question is, what has President Trump done right and what has he done wrong in this pandemic? Okay, Drew?
I think that Trump has done a lot right with the early travel restrictions, and I think he's done right with making sure that our hospitals have been are equipped for dealing with patients, and also I think he's done a good job with the vaccine and raising support for the vaccine and getting companies to work for that vaccine, that successful vaccine.
Thank you. Lauren, same question.
I think he started out this pandemic all wrong by when he was first warned about it, that it was coming over, he done nothing because he didn't want to worry people, put people in a panic. Well, people needed to be aware of what was coming for them, and we needed to shut down the economy then, but he waited until it had already got here and had spread tremendously to shut down. And I feel like we have opened up numerous parts too early.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, for our next question. Okay, for Drew, why is immigration frowned upon when this land was not ours in the first place, when the majority are just looking for a better life? For Lauren, if Biden can say things and have them called slip-ups, why can't Trump? Okay, Lauren?
The reason I say slip-ups for Biden is because someone mentioned just a clip. Trump has said these comments on numerous occasions. Slip-ups do not happen on a daily. They happen every once in a while and are very rare.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew.
So I don't think that our nation frowns upon immigration. I think many frown upon illegal immigration, but from my experience, I think that a lot of people would love legal immigration to the United States.
Thank you, Drew. Next question. Okay, the question is, Biden has been in politics for 47 years. Why do you think he can or cannot make a difference now as president? Drew, we'll begin with you.
So Biden has had a lot of experience and say-so in American politics for a long time, and I think that a lot of things that he has been involved in have not worked well for the country. And I do think that it is a good time to have a new face in politics, possibly.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren?
47 years he's been involved, I feel like that means great experience, because that is one thing you need to run for president is experience. The reason I think that he hasn't made big differences is because he hasn't been the president. He hasn't been in charge. So therefore his say isn't always the last say. It is the president who makes the final decision on what goes and what doesn't.
Thank you, Lauren. For our next question, Matthew. The question is, what steps would each of you propose for ending mass incarceration? Okay, we'll begin with Lauren.
That one's a tough one. My steps, I'm gonna have to pass and let me think about that one for a minute. If Drew, you have an answer.
Drew?
Yes, I would say that mass incarceration is an issue that our nation needs to deal with. I think that a lot of prisons are being crowded, and there need to be reforms for incarceration and prisons both.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to Lauren.
Okay. So the steps. There would be obviously many steps. First, I know it is overcrowded like Drew said, but with the steps being, first I would go back and see if any of them had racial problems, if someone was falsely accused of or discriminated on, whether it be by race or sexuality or whatever. It may be, but it is a high populated, and I feel like we should lessen that, because that is where most of our money goes, and some people are out living there and they're innocent. They're just accused. But as steps, that's each step. I'm not sure how to give step-by-step instructions on that.
Thank you, Lauren. Next question, Matthew. The question is there a policy in your party that you personally disagree with? Good question. Lauren? Well, wait. We did Lauren, we did Matthew, back to Lauren, so I guess it would be fair to go to Lauren.
Okay. Policy I probably disagree with. I don't think so.
Okay, Drew?
I don't have a specific policy in mind, really, but I do think that looking at Republicans, there is a lot of, specifically with immigration, I feel like there's a lot of Republicans kind of pressuring immigration, illegal and legal. But I do think that we need to have sort of a more progressive view, or not really progressive isn't the right word, but I think that Republicans should definitely be on top of safely and legally getting immigrants over to the country.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, for our next question, Matthew. Okay, audience, you've been doing a great job with questions. Okay, for Drew, what can be done to help the rising homelessness population? And do you think education is a prominent factor in homelessness? For Lauren, how can you excuse the way Biden refuses to reveal whether or not he will pass the court and attempt to achieve a majority after the election of Amy Coney Barrett? Okay, Drew?
Okay, so I do think that the government needs to deal with homelessness more. I'm not exactly sure of a creative way to deal with that, but there definitely need to be some policies passed for homelessness people. But I think that education, K-12 education, is a very important for the students, that we need to focus more in K-12 education on, I would say, mental health, and I would say workforce development and workforce training, so that we can encourage more students to pursue jobs and to pursue college, post-secondary school, and also with mental health, we need to do a better job in the schools dealing with that.
Okay. Thank you, Drew. Lauren, your question?
Packing the court has been done before, so we know it works. It has been a good minute, and I feel like it should be, I feel like he should tell us, since we are voting for him, whether he is or is not going to do it. I do not agree with that part, but if he does do it, I feel like it would be good. And with the whole Amy being put on the Supreme Court with 8 days till election, I do not agree with, due to them in 2016, as I've already mentioned, not letting Obama nominate his back in February, when several months till election.
Thank you, Lauren. For our next question, Matthew. Okay, the question is, what will each of you do to address the issue of white nationalism and the resurgence of hate crimes? We'll begin with Lauren.
Well, hate crimes, I feel like, are childish, for one. And with what would I do with it, or about it, I would pack down on it and get to the bottom, and the best way I could.
Thank you, Lauren. Drew?
So I think that not just the government, but we citizens of the United States, we need to work together to sort of start and make a crusade, to fight against hate crimes and white nationalism. I think that those are two issues that need to be addressed, and we need to voice that those aren't right, and just work on that as a nation.
Thank you, Drew. For our next question. Okay, the question. Many of the people who are incarcerated now are in for drug charges with sentences that are too harsh. As far as the incarceration goes, do you believe that sentences for drug charges should be lightened? Drew?
I do think that the drug charge sentences can be lightened, but I think that we don't just need to lighten them, but we need to see that those people are required to, say, partake in a program or community work stuff like that. But the sentences, yeah, can be lightened.
Thank you, Drew. Lauren?
If by drug we're talking about marijuana, I feel like no one should be in jail for marijuana. It's a plant that, even though it is illegal, I don't think they should spend jail time. Maybe have, like Drew said, some community service or something. But we don't need to take the lives away from someone for marijuana usage. That is a big part that is packing up our prisons and causing it more expensive for our country.
Thank you, Lauren. For our next question, Matthew.
We're going to do about 2 or 3 more questions, so if you have any last-minute questions, please put them in the chat now.
Okay, the question is, do the both of you truly believe that your candidate is a good option to lead this country where there is so much civil unrest, and why? Okay, Lauren?
As of my options of Biden or Trump, to truly believe that my candidate will successfully run this country, yes, I would pick Biden over Trump. And even though it is so much things that are unrested right now, that's why I feel like we need a new leader. That way a new leader can step in and hopefully make a difference in this.
Thank you, Lauren. Now, Drew?
Of course, I believe that Trump is the best option, and I think that our nation is in a lot of unrest, but not all of it is Trump's fault. Most of it is outside forces causing this. And so I think that if we look past that, Trump is a good option to maintain our country and to make it better.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, we have time for about 2 more questions at the most. So, audience. Okay, for Drew, should the United States rejoin the Paris Climate Agreement? And for Lauren, what should be done about the parent of the 545 children separated at the border? Okay, Drew?
So Trump pulled out of the Paris climate agreement because he noticed that it was not really helping the U.S. It was holding the U.S. back, and it would harm the U.S. So I don't think that we should join back into that agreement.
Thank you, Drew. Now, Lauren, your question?
Forgot to unmute myself. This is a big problem, and I do not feel like people should be separated. If you've been in this country for an extended period of time and you've built your life here, that should make you haven't caused any problems and you are following the rules as a citizen, then I feel like that we should give you your citizenship. It shouldn't be as hard for you to renew your card or to get even your TPS or deferred enforced departure. It should be simple, especially if you've built your life here and you have a family. I don't think families should be separated, and we need to create directives of our immigration system to reunite families and enhance our diversity with that.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay, one more question from the audience, if anyone has one. Okay, if not, I have one last question. Well, maybe we do. All right, we have one more question from the audience. So the question is, should we abolish, reform, or maintain the Electoral College? And if a third party viable in these trying times? It's a very good question. Lauren?
Can I see that question again? Sorry.
Matthew, can you pull that question back up?
My end was kind of glitchy.
Okay. Should we abolish, reform, or maintain the Electoral College? And if a third party viable in these trying times?
Okay, I think we should maintain the electoral party because, and I do think that the third party has a chance in this trying times. So if you do agree with the third party, I would say vote for them too. Keep in mind all parties during this and vote whichever one benefits you. And take in what both me and Drew say and do some research on your own for when you go out and vote. That way you know for sure who you want to vote for and why.
Thank you. Now, Drew?
I think that the Electoral College should be maintained as well. I think it is a fine and fair establishment, and our nation has used it for the longest time, and I believe that it works. With the third party, I don't think that voting for a third party is necessarily viable. I would say stick with the two main parties.
Okay, thank you, Drew. And I have one last question for each of our participants. We'll begin with you, Drew. To end the debate, what is your party's greatest strength?
I think my party's greatest strength is that we are very good at remembering where our country has been and what our country stands for and what it has stood for throughout its whole existence as a light to the rest of the world. And so I think that is my party's greatest strength.
Okay, thank you, Drew. Lauren?
My party's greatest strength would have to be the encouraging diversity. Bringing together people of different ethnic backgrounds, sexuality, racial, and just bringing us all together and showing what America truly is and sharing our differences and empowering each other for each individual human rights.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. So we're about out of time, so we're going to wrap up this debate. I would like to thank both of our participants. I think you've done a very good job. I would like to thank Matthew Anderson for his help in fielding questions from the audience. We would like to thank Mr. Jared Blackwell for his help in setting up this on Teams and on YouTube. We appreciate your help so very much. I hope this debate has been very helpful to you, and please vote. Have a great day.